Good morning. Welcome to the morning show of yours truly, Dex the Algo Capitalist. It's Monday and it's April the 8th, 2024. It's Solar Eclipse Day. Everyone is excited to see the phenomenon in the sky. There's been a lot of prognostication of what it may mean, what it may entail, what may transpire before, during, and after. And we've we've talked about it. We've touched on it in our last show. We talked about some of the significant aspects of it and what it could mean and what it should mean. And we did the comparisons to what happened to the Ninevites in Nineveh when the prophet Jonah visited. We talked about that. We touched on that. And we have many more things to touch on today. It is a jam packed show for you this morning. So you're definitely going to want to get a strong cup of coffee or tea if you prefer, and find a real comfortable seat because you're going to need to strap in. We have a lot to talk about. And we're going to get it in as much as possible. I know I left you with a cliffhanger during the last show as well. And we'll see if time permits. I don't want to go too long, but how about this? I'll go as long as you guys tell me to go. All right? How about that? We'll get it in. We'll do what we got to do. So, we're going to talk about the markets first, like we always do. We're going to take a look at the current markets and see what happened overnight. And then we're going to talk about some of the market news that will impact the markets. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the economy. We'll do our normal routine here. And then we'll start looking at some other things. We'll start talking about some other important things that you should be made aware of that is happening. Okay. I try to approach things here a little bit differently than what you would normally get on any type of social media platform, whether it's the mainstream media or the alternative media. I try to cover everything from a bibliocentric worldview. And we talk about difficult and tough topics. We discuss things that may even be taboo for most. We have no fear here. All right. We go there and we ask the hard questions and we dive in. We take the lid off. We probe deeply into the depths of the murky water and we see what comes out. Sometimes we can find a lot of catfish, some cod, maybe, even some tuna, and we eat good. Then other times we find sludge and all types of trash and old boots, hubcaps, all types of things that people throw into the river. So, first of all, though, I will say this. You do need to know this. I'm going to tell you this before I forget. So, this week is packed full of intel. On Wednesday, we have core CPI coming out and the consumer price index. All right. And we got wholesale inventories. All right. That's going to be important. Then we got the minutes of the Fed's March FOMC meeting. Okay. So that is important. Wednesday is an important day. Then on Thursday, we got core PPI, producer price index, and initial jobless claims. Okay. That's a big deal. And then on Friday, we have import price index and consumer sentiment, the preliminary. Okay. So that is important. So this week we got some hard hitting data. And these is what you would call extreme uh, market moving events. Okay. So CPI, PPI, consumer sentiment, initial jobless claims, these are a big deal. The minutes of the FOMC meeting, big deal, and could have a rather significant impact on markets. So you need to understand that as we get, closer to these events. So today and tomorrow, nothing to see here. Don't worry about it. Not any news you need to be concerned about, but it all kicks off on Wednesday. All right, so let's get into these overnight markets, shall we? So the US dollar index is taking a day off today. It's down 14 pips at 104.14. Still not able to really, get a solid consecutive close above that 105. The warning for you is, or the alarm, the alert, shall we, is once the US dollar index stays above that 105 and closes consecutively above that 105, that is the alarm bell for you, because then the White House's strong dollar policy really will kick in at that point and make the dollar even stronger, and then that's what will catapult the US dollar to that 108 handle I've been warning you about. The second alarm is that 108 handle. Once the US dollar hits 108, that's when everything starts to hit the fan. Because if we hit 108, it's going to the 120s, folks. I'm sorry to have to tell you that. If it goes to the 120s, folks, it's going to the 140s. You mark my words. That is the sign that you need to be afraid of. Not the solar eclipse, but this US dollar, these milestones I just gave you. All right. So because of that, on the back of that this morning, we have the euro up 21 pips at 108.87, the pound sterling up 15 at 126.54, and the Aussie, nice little bump here, up 24 at 66.18. Finally, the Aussie is back above the 66 handle. If it can hold that, then that means it can take out that 67 psychological resistance barrier. All right. And if that happens, we got an Aussie that will be on fire. And I'm going to venture to say we could see the Aussie back into the 80s, folks. I know, hard to believe, right? I'm telling you what it is. Bitcoin futures up $4,635 right now at $72,390. Okay. Now, you need to understand that this Bitcoin and the Ethereum futures are in a locked in bull market. Locked in. When we say locked in, it means the trend is bullish. And then you have the, excuse me, the trend momentum indicator aligned with the trend. Locked in. Okay. The pullback was your signal to get long the market. And all of our subscribers who subscribe to the attack reports received that message before the futures got to the 72 handle. All right, that's the power of the attack reports. Ethereum is up $332 this morning at $3,669. It did hit 37 even in the overnight market, just like the Bitcoin futures at 73,410 in the overnight market. Crude oil is also taking a breather today, down 72 cents. It's $86.19 a barrel this morning. It did touch $87.11 though, so it got up there briefly to the 87 handle, but could not hold it, and it's since reversed, and we are bouncing off the overnight low of $84.68. The nat gas this morning is up a nickel at $1.83. Gold futures are up $2.60 an ounce, trading at $2,348. We briefly topped out in the overnight market at $2,372.60 an ounce. Not to be outdone, silver up 38 cents this morning, trading at $27.88 an ounce. It did top that $28 handle briefly, hit $28.18 an ounce. So it is showing strength. And the overnight low was $26.98. So almost $1 rally off the overnight low. Copper up 2 cents at $4.26. Dow futures are up 51 at 39,274. E-mini S&P 500 up 11 at 5264 even, and the E-mini Nasdaq 100 up 44 and a quarter points at 18,345 and three quarters, and the Russell My Hustle up 12.6 at 2095.10. So that is our overnight snapshot of the markets. Now, I see you here, Low Rider, asking, can we please elaborate on why we should be concerned with a $140? Okay. So, as you already are familiar with, a strong dollar, all right, makes things on the import export a little off kilter, because then it means that things are more expensive and with the US dollar. So it's going to cost people more dollars to buy our stuff. And as you know, the more expensive things are, the less of it people will be able to buy. So that it will affect us on the import export. The reason why the White House wants to keep the US dollar as strong as possible is to try to shore it up as the world reserve currency. Because if more flight to safety toward the dollar is happening, then less flight against competing assets is following. Now, the other phenomenon that the Federal Reserve is having to really deal with is the alignment of the US dollar and Bitcoin. And I've been telling you about that, right? So the US dollar is trying to relock on to the Bitcoin, and it's been struggling to do it. That correlation existed for a long time when the Bitcoin futures first came out. And then from that point, things decoupled. But now the dollar is trying to get back in there. Um, it's funny because the US dollar also kind of is like an indicator on inflation per se as well. The higher the US dollar goes, the less buying power you're going to have, the more hyperinflation starts to rear its ugly head. And in food and energy, we've already seen hyperinflation. We've seen 1,000% increase in the cost of goods and services across the board in food and energy. And then with a $86 a barrel crude oil, that makes it even more. The higher the crude oil costs, the higher the energy costs. And that acts as a tax on the American people. When crude oil is low, it acts as a stimulus to the people. But when it's high and inching toward that $100 barrel mark, it puts more of an impact on you and your ability to spend. So your purchasing power erodes rapidly the higher crude oil goes. And then if you have a high dollar on the back of a high crude oil, so now food and energy have just exploded on you. So your dollar already buys less today than it did 50 years ago. With a 140 US dollar index, you're basically bankrupt. You're impoverished. You can't afford to eat. That's why this is a big deal. All right. That's why this is a really big deal. So Nvidia's skyrocketing stock price might finally slow down. A wrongful death lawsuit against Tesla starts today. And sneaky new credit card fees could be on the horizon. But first, China. If you build it, they will come. Even if they don't, they just keep building. That's the West's major concern with China these days. The country is overproducing goods and then flooding global markets with them to save its struggling economy. We've seen this strategy before in China decades ago as the country opened up its economy. China underwent the rapid industrialization, allowing it to produce cheap goods. The US and other countries cheered China on, profiting handsomely along the way from the lower production costs. But the result was US communities that relied on manufacturing jobs were decimated. The process was known as China Shock, and the rest of the world isn't interested in a sequel. China Shock 2.0 isn't a total repeat. This time, China is focused on green energy, which involves making electric vehicles, solar cells, and lithium ion batteries. And it's also building out a supply chain to get the materials to produce the stuff, which is also concerning for the West. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has already warned China Shock 2.0 could destabilize the global economy, specifically impacting green energy exports. And a New York Federal Reserve report suggests this could ultimately lead to higher inflation in the U.S., hence that rising U.S. dollar index. See where this is going? Even as it faces global pressure, some believe China remains a good investment. Most notable among them is none other than, wait for it, Ray Dalio. The billionaire founder of Bridgewater Associates has been a long-time investor in the country, and that's not going to change anytime soon. He acknowledged China faces some major challenges, describing it as a 100-year storm, but he's not looking to exit. Instead, he believes it's the best time to invest in China, citing the adage, the time to buy is when there is blood in the streets. Dalio is not alone in his optimism. Economist Nicholas R. Lardy believes experts are misreading the data. He pointed to China's GDP growth outpacing the U.S. when the numbers are adjusted for disinflation and inflation in each country, respectively. Now, regardless of which side you fall on, it's a topic that will remain relevant for the foreseeable future. U.S. China relations will be a focus in the lead up to the presidential election. And while former President Donald Trump has been more vocal about ramping up the trade war, both candidates are expected to address it head on if elected. Now, as far as your Monday headline catch up, the U.S. China relationship appears to be warming up, but Russia could still be a sticking point. Coach Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks won the NCAA Women's Championship. All that star Giovanni Samuel says Dan Snyder reached out to her before Quiet on Set aired and asked her to publicly support him. Russia is losing close to 1,000 soldiers in Ukraine every day, but it won't stop relying on mass assaults to brute force frontline advances, according to UK intelligence. Mark Zuckerberg owns over 1,200 acres of land. Here's a look at the properties across the U.S. from a Hawaiian doomsday bunker to Lake Tahoe estates. Meet Sam Altman's family. Saudi Arabia's futuristic $500 billion neon magna city just got a lot smaller for now, reports say. And Nvidia's hot streak could be ending. Some Wall Street analysts are cooling on the stock market's golden child, suggesting it can't keep its rapid pace of growth. There's also the risk companies start building chips to run specific AI workloads in-house. The nightmare of no rate cuts this year could become a reality. What once seemed like an impossibility, interest rates remaining untouched in 2024, could now be where things are headed, according to some experts. Angus Deaton is having a rethink. The Nobel Prize winning economist stated that his views on unions, free trade, and immigration have shifted in recent years. I think the country is in sort of a bad way, in spite of all its hoopla that's going on about how we're doing economically. And so I'm an economist now, sort of thinking, well, how should I change my practice of economics a little bit, he said. And in tech news, Tesla is going on trial over a deadly 2018 autopilot crash. Apple engineer Walter Hoang died when his Tesla Model X SUV crashed into a concrete barrier while in autopilot mode. The EV maker is heading to court today over a wrongful death lawsuit filed by his family. Apple is falling far from the tree. It's been a rough 2024 for the tech giant, with a slump in iPhone sales, stalled EV plans, and a massive antitrust lawsuit. Worse yet, last week the company laid off 600 staffers. Wall Street has a new tech obsession. Analysts can't stop talking about Salesforce competitor HubSpot. Its stock surged last week after Reuters reported that Google parent Alphabet had discussed making an offer to buy the $34 billion software company. And in other business news, the biggest secret at work, your office crush. Throughout the years, workplace crushes have remained remarkably common. It makes sense. We spend half of our waking lives at work. These crushes have the power to bring out our best work and even make the office experience fun, but they can also make it a soul crushing one. Dun, dun, dun. Younger generations are splashing the cash on groceries. McKinsey polled 4,000 people and found that groceries are the hottest new splurge category for millennials and Gen Zers. That's been good news for companies like the flashy canned water brand Liquid Death, recently valued at $1.4 billion. Get ready for sneaky new credit card fees. While some fees may soon be getting smaller, it just means that companies are about to find new ways to get money out of you. Yeah, anything short of flipping you upside down and shaking you until all the coins fall out of your pocket. In other news, there is no loneliness epidemic. Apollo's Leon Black says he is so wealthy he didn't know he paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million. Can you imagine what that must be like to be so wealthy that you don't even notice $158 million missing from your bank account? Google's executive productivity advisor says these two common pitfalls are making people less efficient at work. Instagram makes more ad money than YouTube, new court filings reveal. If you've been laid off or fired, here's what you should tell employers in your next job interview. Job growth surged more than expected in March, and meet the world's richest self made woman, a shipping magnate worth $33 billion. And as you all know, there's no such thing as a self made person. Someone somewhere gave you a break, an opportunity, or opened a door for you that allowed you to get to your next level. There's no such a thing as self made. No man is an island. What's happening today? The first total solar eclipse will be visible to the U.S. since 2017. An NCAA men's basketball championship game will take place in Glendale, Arizona. All right, folks, I told you there was a lot of news that we had to go over today, and we've got it out the way. All right, let's see. We got a question here in the live feed. So you think Fed will cut rates before the dollar get that high? Well, that's a loaded question. How do we say this? How do I put it? Okay, so I think one thing has nothing to do with the other. All right, so here's my take on the Fed, and this is what I've been saying from the beginning, and that has not changed, by the way. My opinion's still the same. I believe that the Fed will not cut interest rates because, according to the data, there's no reason to do so. The only way the Fed will be forced into a corner, back against the wall, gun to the head, and the market saying run it, they're not going to do anything. What does that scenario mean? What does that look like? The market backing the Fed into the corner with the gun to the dome saying run it, empty your pockets, run your jewels, give me all of that. The equivalent of that is the market collapsing, crashing, falling apart. Multiple consecutive days of the Dow falling more than 500 points in a single day. That would get the Fed to stand up and take notice. If the Dow were to fall more than 1,000 points in one day and close negative 1,000 points, that too would trigger the Fed to do an in-between, an intermeeting rate cut, emergency intermeeting rate cut with no announcement, no heads up, just in the middle of the trading session, boom, rate cut. They've done it before. All right. So before you say, oh, that will never happen, they've done it before. They have done it before. In between meetings, emergency rate cut. Look it up. So, yeah, I think that's the only way the Fed's going to lower rates. Now, there's another kind of catch-22 gray area that would make them forced to do it, is if the economic data starts coming in whack, meaning totally counter to their game plan, to their narrative. Let's say, all right, here's a good example. They've been saying, they've been expecting the job market to be a lot worse than what their numbers are portraying. And because it isn't, they feel like they don't have to do anything. But let's say all of a sudden businesses started to really go bankrupt, go belly up, major Fortune 500 companies, and major banks start collapsing. Like, let's say Bank of America, breaking news. Bank of America just collapsed. There's a run on the bank. There's 10,000 people standing outside the main branch in New York. This is phenomenal. Then that would make the Fed go ahead and lower their interest rates. Absolutely. They would do what they have to do. So anything short of absurd economic data coming in and or a total collapse of stock prices, that would be the only two things that would make the Fed be forced to lower those rates. Anything less than those two scenarios I just gave you, the Fed will not lower rates at all until those two things happen, or either or of those things happen. All right, so since today is Eclipse Day, I figured we would touch on something that really isn't talked about regarding this. Now, I covered this a few days ago. We talked about it, but we hit it from a different perspective. Today, we're going to hit it from an even different, more perspective, okay? We're going to talk about why this particular part, the mainstream media is not even talking about or touching on at all, like it doesn't exist. Like, the elephant in the room, we're all sitting in a elegant dining room, and there's a big African bull elephant in the corner, and everyone's acting like the elephant doesn't exist, like they don't see the elephant there with the big body taking up mad space in the dining hall. And that's what I think this is too. So let's talk about it, because it needs to be talked about. Okay, so I want you to sit down, put your thinking caps on. Okay, as the Great American Eclipse of 2024 is here today, and the mainstream media has been packed with stories that debunk various conspiracy theories. Of course, in order to have a conspiracy theory, you've got to have more than one individual that is alleged to be involved in some sort of a conspiracy. And so you got to break things down, okay? In any event, there are certainly a lot of theories about this eclipse that are clearly not accurate, and the mainstream media has successfully debunked a number of them. However, there is one theory, just one, regarding this eclipse that the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about. So let's go there. In Genesis chapter 1, God specifically told us that one of the reasons why he created the sun and the moon is because they would be used as signs. All right. And God said, "Let there be light in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." Anyone that has read the first page of the Bible should know this. This is extremely basic stuff. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, Jesus specifically warned us that there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars during the years just prior to his return. So you know how everyone's talking about, oh, this is the end of the world, blah, blah, blah. All right. So, and then you have people saying, no, this is not the end times, or this is not the last days, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's not true. All right. It's not true. The clock started ticking when Jesus rose from the grave and ascended into heaven. As soon as he ascended into heaven, the clock started ticking. That started the last days. That started the end times. During the apostles' reign, they believed that Jesus' return was going to happen in their lifetime. It was so important of a topic that the apostles taught it as they planted churches and the gospel spread throughout the region. They taught eschatology. Eschatology was considered a part of the basics of the gospel. Did you know that? But yet, 2,000 years into the future, we're closer to the second return, the return of Christ than they were 2,000 years ago, and they believed that he was coming back in their lifetime. So, yeah, we have been living in the last days and the end times since he ascended into heaven. Facts. So, we should be watching for signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars in the end times, because Jesus instructed us to watch for the signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars in the end times. Once again, this is extremely basic stuff. Of course, the mainstream media would like to convince all of us that anyone that believes that the Great American Eclipse of 2024 has any sort of special significance is a few bricks short of a load. And you can believe that if you want, but the mainstream media can never debunk the Aleph and the Tav that are being completed today. As the Great American Eclipse of 2024 passes over the United States today, it will cross over the path of the Ring of Fire solar eclipse of October the 14th, 2023, and the path of the Great American Eclipse of 2017. Now, in the process, an absolutely enormous Paleo Hebrew Aleph will be completed over America. According to EclipseWitness.com, there has never been such a tightly formed, obvious aleph over the interior borders of any nation in at least the last 1,000 years. The aleph that is being formed does not look anything like the aleph that has evolved in modern Hebrew. Rather, the aleph that is being formed looks just like the aleph that was commonly used when many of the books of the Bible were being written in ancient Israel. The aleph has always been the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and from the earliest times, it has always meant strength, authority, or power. Remember that because it will be important later. If you remove the Ring of Fire solar eclipse of October the 14th, 2023 from the equation, the paths of the Great American Eclipse of 2024 and the Great American Eclipse of 2017 form a giant Paleo Hebrew Tav over America. At the heart of that Tav is a giant X that intersects directly over the New Madrid fault zone in southern Illinois. Now, the Tav has always been the very last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and from the earliest times, it has always meant mark or covenant. And in the earliest forms, the Tav was simply a picture of two wooden sticks crossing one another. In other words, the Tav was simply a wooden cross. Ultimately, the Tav represents the covenant that God made with humanity at the wooden cross. And when you see the Aleph and the Tav together, strength, authority, and power is being combined with the covenant that God made with humanity at the wooden cross. The Taleph is actually in the original Hebrew in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 1, but it is never translated in any of our English versions. And the Aleph Tav is also found thousands of other times throughout the Old Testament. But today, I want you to think about the appearances of the Aleph Tav in the book of Revelation. In the first chapter of the book of Revelation, Jesus identifies himself as the Alpha and Omega. Now, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet in verse 10. And then in verse 11, saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, and what thou seest, write in a book and send it unto the seven churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus and unto Smyrna, and unto Pergamos, and unto Thyatira, and unto Sardis, and unto Philadelphia, and unto Laodicea. And in the very last chapter of the book of Revelation, Jesus once again identifies himself as the Alpha and Omega. And verse 13, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So, if Jesus is telling us the exact same thing in the very first chapter of the book of Revelation and the very last chapter of the book of Revelation, it must be important. Now, that is a style of hermeneutics and a style of writing, specifically in the Old Testament, where a thought is repeated but said differently. Like, for instance, I'll give you just an example. Say, like, he entered the room and turned on the light, and the light was turned on when he hit the switch. So that kind of writing style. Needless to say, the Alpha and Omega and the first and the last letters of the Greek alphabet. But I believe that the original conversations between Jesus and the Apostle John in the book of Revelation were not in Greek. You see, the truth is that the Apostle John did not speak Greek, he spoke Hebrew. So when Jesus appeared to John, he would have spoken to him in a language that he could understand. So in the original conversations that we find in the book of Revelation, it's believed that Jesus and the Apostle John were speaking to each other in Hebrew. Instead of saying that he is the Alpha and the Omega during the original conversations, Jesus would have said that he is the Aleph and the Tav. The Apostle John would have immediately recognized that Jesus was saying that he is the Aleph Tav that we find in Genesis 1:1. And he would have immediately recognized that Jesus was saying that he is the Aleph Tav that appears thousands of times throughout the Old Testament. Now, the Aleph Tav is literally being painted in the skies above America, and hardly anyone is even talking about this. The two Hebrew letters that Jesus specifically identified himself with will be completed in the heavens today. And meanwhile, the sun, the moon, and the other so called quote unquote seven planets in our solar system will all be lined up in the night sky. And all of this is happening on the first day of the first month on the Hebrew calendar. Can you understand why the mainstream media does not want to talk about any of this? The heavens are literally screaming out that Jesus is Lord, and we are very fortunate to be living during the times just prior to his return. Hence, the call for America to repent. See what I'm saying? They don't want to talk about this. They talk about everything else but this. Okay? All right, I see you. So the question is, sorry, Dex, to go off topic. So is easy money back? I thought when rates are low means money is harder to get. That's not necessarily, like they say, correlation does not equal causation. So money has always been tough to get if you have bad credit, but a lot easier to get when you have great credit. So easy money, technically speaking, it depends on what your definition of easy money is. I have a different take on it. I never believed that money was really easy to get. Even during the mortgage crisis of 2008, when they were making all these, loans and stuff, all these loan packages and programs, you still had to meet certain requirements. They just wasn't just giving it to anybody. Even the NINA loans, the no income, no asset loans, you had to have a particular credit score that was considered great credit. They wasn't giving NINA loans to a 500 FICO. They wasn't giving NINA loans to a 600 FICO. You had to be above 720 for them to even consider giving you a NINA loan. And really, like a lot of the vanilla type banks, they wanted 800 FICO scores for a lot of those elaborate loan programs. All right. So it was only people with great credit, not good credit, that were getting access to the money. And that's been always. The thing that made the mortgage crisis of '08 so bad is that they were giving money to everybody. What they did is they came up with a scheme to give poor people loans that normally would not have gotten them. So you could go under the first time home buyer program. You could go FHA. If you was a veteran, you could go VA. And then even the conventional loans got in on it and start making products for 100% of financing, zero down payments. But that still wasn't easy. You still had to meet certain requirements. And in those cases, on the conventional side, those were full doc loans. They were not no doc loans. People got it kind of confused here. No doc loans were the great credit score people. All right. Everyone else, for the most part, was pretty much anyone that was below a 720 had to go full doc. All right. Not limited doc, full doc. And a full doc loan was always encompassing W-2s and in some cases W-2s and bank statements and tax returns. Yeah, they wanted W-2s, bank statements, and tax returns, and any amount of deposits in your account that were $10,000 and greater. In most cases, they wanted it sourced and seasoned for 90 days. Some were more generous and said source and season for 30 days, but for the most part, those large deposits had to be sourced and seasoned. Those were the requirements, because a lot of people were taking advantage of the situation where they could go to a friend or family member and say, give me $10,000 or $20,000, deposit it into their bank account just so they can say, see, I got money in my bank. And then after the loan closes, they give the money back to whoever gave it to them. And they never really had the money at all, but it was enough to get them to pass through underwriting. So yeah, money has never been easy to get. I don't know why they came up with that term, easy money. It's not really easy. I could see where they're, if you were going to, debate it from the point or the perspective of credit card debt, that's different, because there was a place in time where credit card companies and banks were giving out credit cards to people of questionable credit, and they were just, throwing out that. So yeah, if you want to come at from that angle, then yeah, I could see you saying easy money, because they were just blanketing the world with credit cards. But that and that still doesn't really equal easy money to me, because money's never been easy to get. You got to work for money. And like I said, those loans were not free. Those full doc loans came with high interest rates. And even before we had a thing such as the FICO score in the late 80s, early 1990s, there was no FICO scores and all that. So, and the interest rates back in the 80s was in the 20 percentile, 20%, 22%. And people were still buying houses. You couldn't fathom that today, buying a house with a 22% interest rate. But in the 80s, people were doing it left and right. So would you say that was easy money? Not at all. So I just don't buy the term easy money. Nothing's easy. Fed stimulus, you could call that easy money as far as stimulus to the stock market. that's kind of that. I guess you could take it from that perspective, but for the citizenry, nah, I never saw it as easy money. Not even a little bit. All right, folks. So I hope you got something out of today's show. Um, there's a whole lot more I wanted to get into, but for time's sake, I think we're gonna go ahead and cut it here, and then we'll see what happens tomorrow. All right, y'all know what it is, man. The system works if you work the system. Bulls make money, bears make money, and you know what? Pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can and give nothing back. That simply means take whatever profit you can amass from the stock market or the futures market or the crypto market or the forex market without giving it back in the form of losses. Never turn winning trades into losing trades. That's what that simply means. And on that, be encouraged. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out. Peace.